this might be the moment that the right either finally gets serious or tears itself apart completely. Because what's happening right now is not just a disagreement over policy, it's deeper than that. On one side, you've got people sticking with Nigel Farage and reform, saying if you want power, you need structure, discipline, and a machine that can actually win. Now, on the other side, you've got a growing number of people rallying behind Rupert, Lowe, and Restore, saying we've already tried careful strategy, and all it ever seems to produce is another version of disappointment. So the real question now is, why are some reform voters doubling down on reform, while others are saying, aim high, vote low? Because this is not politics anymore. For a lot of people, right now, this feels personal. Now, to be fair, a lot of people sticking with reform are not doing it because they're blind loyalists. They're doing it because, in their eyes, they're being realistic. Because whatever you think about Nigel Farage, one thing is obvious. He understands politics. He understands media, momentum, messaging, pressure, and how to get attention when everybody else is asleep at the wheel. And for reform voters, that matters. Because in their view, politics is not just about saying the right thing. It's about building something that can actually take power, which means structure, candidates, recognition, organisation, and a leader who has already survived political warfare before. And underneath that is the one big fear, the split vote. Because to some reform supporters, that is not just online theory, it's a very real danger. And the argument is simple. If the right fractures, then the result is not new energy. It's another win for the same old machine. So for them, the choice is not perfect versus imperfect, it's strategy versus self-sabotage. But then there's the other side of this. And honestly, that side is growing for a reason. Because for a lot of people now, this is no longer about strategy. It's about trust. There's a feeling out there that people have heard these same promises for years. Strong words, tough sounding interviews, carefully timed outrage, big speeches. But then what? Nothing really changes. And this is where Rupert Lowe is cutting through. Not because he's polished, not because he sounds like a party machine, but because to a lot of people, he sounds like someone who actually means it. And that's why you keep seeing the same phrase again and again. Aim high, vote low. And that phrase matters because it's not just a slogan, it's a signal. A signal that a lot of people are done compromising before the fight has even started. And this is where some of the criticism of Farage gets sharper. Not always that he's wrong, but he's become too careful, too measured, too willing to work inside a system that a lot of voters no longer believe can be fixed from within. And for Restore voters, supporters, that's the problem. Because from a Restore point of view, if you continue playing the same game the same way, you get the same result. So the move towards Restore is not just political, it's emotional. It's people saying, we just don't want someone who can win. We want someone who actually means it. And this is where the whole thing stops being abstract. Because underneath all of this, there are actual issues driving the divide. And the biggest one is obviously immigration. Because this is where a lot of voters feel the gap between words and reality hit hardest. Reform talks tough. And to their supporters, that's necessary and it's strategic. But to a lot of Restore-leaning voters, it sounds too much like we'll deal with it later. And people are sick of later. Then there's housing. And this is where frustration gets personal, because a growing number of people genuinely feel like the system is no longer being run in the interests of their children, their communities, or the next generation trying to build a stable life. And that's where phrases like British first start hitting emotionally. Because for a lot of people, this is not abstract ideology. It's rent, it's waiting lists, it's family formation, security, and whether their kids will ever be able to get a fair shot. Then there's sovereignty, the ECHR, international legal blocks, the sense that even when the public says enough is enough, there always seems to be some higher structure saying, sorry, you cannot do that. And this is why these issues hit so hard, because they're not just policy arguments anymore. They've become a test of seriousness. So this is where the debate really catches fire, because everything eventually comes back to one question. Does Restore split the vote and hand victory to the opposition, or is reform already falling and failing to convert frustration into real change anyway? And that's why this gets heated, because both sides think they are the ones being realistic. For one side, the logic is division equals defeat. Simple, no matter how right you are. If the vote splits, you lose, end of story. But for the other side, the argument feels like a trap, because they look at the current state of Britain and think, well, if this is what realism gives us, then what exactly are we protecting? And that's uncomfortable, because there is no neat answer, only trade-offs, only risks, only uncertainty, and a growing feeling that whatever happens next is going to shape this entire movement for years. And then there is one more factor that can change everything: the silent majority. The belief that there are millions of people in this country who do not vote, not because they don't care, but because they no longer believe actually that anybody represents them. And this is where Restore supporters are seeing a genuine opening, not to take votes from reform, but to activate people who have basically checked out of politics altogether. People who are fed up, cynical, switched off, and waiting for someone who feels genuinely different. And that surge is real. Then the whole split vote argument changes. But if it's not real, then the risk gets much bigger. So the gamble is obvious. Is Restore unlocking something new, or overestimating how many people are actually ready to move? That is the bet. So, no, this is not just reform versus Restore. It's something deeper than that. It is strategy versus trust. One side believes change comes from playing the political game better. The other believes that change only happens when you stop playing this game the same way altogether. And right now, that divide is getting wider. So the real question here is not just who's right, it's this. Is Restore the risk that destroys the right, or the only thing that can actually save it? Let me know in the comments, and be honest, because this one genuinely matters, and this was given to me by a subscriber, so please give us your take on this one.